Welcome to our very first Asia News Today, a daily snapshot of news from around the world's most dynamic region. Always plenty to report. The program will be coming out around 2 p.m. Thai time, 3 p.m. in the Philippines and 4 p.m. in Seoul. In today's news, a surge of serious COVID cases in Japan. A Malaysian MP gently promotes domestic violence. Updates from the presidential campaigning in South Korea and the Philippines, and snakes on a plane. All that coming up on Asia News Today. US prosecutors have accused a former Goldman Sachs banker of taking $35 million in kickbacks on the first day of a trial over the multi-billion-dollar looting of the infamous 1MDB Malaysian government fund. Roger Ng, Goldman's former head of investment banking in Malaysia, stands charged with conspiring to launder money. The trial is renewing scrutiny of Goldman Sachs' role in the international scandal that led to a 12-year jail sentence for Malaysia's former PM, Najib Razak. Ng has pleaded not guilty, and his lawyer has said he's a fall guy for one of the biggest financial scandals in Wall Street history. The trial in Brooklyn Federal Court could last up to 6 weeks. Presidential candidates in South Korea kicked off their campaigns today in what's been dubbed the unlikable election due to high disapproval ratings of the two main candidates from the ruling Democratic Party and its conservative rival, the People's Power Party. It's pegged to be the closest race in 20 years between the two main parties, which have been dominated by scandals, allowing a third candidate to play the potential role of kingmaker. Meanwhile, polls show that Korean voters are seeking a president who could mitigate the inflation of housing prices and the rich-poor divide, as well as an end to corruption and polarising politics. But petty controversies and scandals like a candidate's relationship with a shaman have drowned out the big-ticket issues, such as confronting North Korea's missile program, which may hold sway in the March 9 election. Meanwhile, in the Philippines, presidential candidate Marcos Jr. is gaining favour over Philippines Vice President Leni Robredo. A January poll shows the popular politician, son of the late Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos, has a 44-point lead over his incumbent candidate, with 60% of respondents choosing Marcos compared to just 16% for the vice president. Meanwhile, retired boxing legend Manny Pacquiao has trailed in the polls with just 8% of the votes. If Marcos wins the election, he'd restore honour to the family name, which was shamed 36 years ago when a People's Power revolt ended his father's dictatorship. From today, Vietnam is lifting COVID-19 curbs on international flights from all markets, with no limit on flight numbers. The announcement comes from the Civil Aviation Administration of Vietnam. Vietnam imposed strict border restrictions in the early days of the pandemic, which initially proved successful. But just like Thailand, the measures have critically damaged the country's tourism sectors, which previously accounted for around 10 to 20% of GDP. Some international flights to Vietnam have already resumed from 15 markets since the beginning of this year, with the government easing quarantine requirements and vaccinated arrivals only required to self-isolate for 3 days. Since the start of the pandemic, Vietnam has reported over 2.5 million COVID-19 infections and nearly 39,000 deaths. The country has now administered 2 vaccine doses to nearly 98% of its 98 million population. After originally pointing the finger at a SpaceX rocket that will crash into the moon next month, astronomers now claim the doomed rocket is of Chinese origin. A rocket heading for impact with the lunar surface on March the 4th was originally thought to be built by Elon Musk's company SpaceX, but now they've identified the wayward craft as the booster for a Chinese Chang'e 5T1, launched back in 2014 as part of the Chinese Space Agency's lunar exploration program. Astronomer Bill Gray, who first identified next month's lunar collision, admitted the mistake last weekend. For their part, NASA has turned lemons into lemonade by saying that the impending explosion on the lunar surface, no matter the origin of the spacecraft, is an exciting research opportunity. Myanmar's military have decided not to attend an Asean meeting in Cambodia this week, dissing an invitation to send a non-political representative instead of the junta's chief diplomat. The decision to restrict Myanmar's participation in the Asean meeting reflects a disagreement over Myanmar's lack of cooperation with the Southeast Asian trading bloc to help ease the political crisis following last year's February coup. The latest standoff from the Burmese military follows last October's ASEAN meeting when the leader of the junta, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, wasn't invited to the virtual meeting of ASEAN leaders. Under the ASEAN annual rotation system, Cambodia is now the chair of the group. Cambodian PM Hun Sen says he believes it's important that Myanmar attend the next summit meeting. Women's groups and people across gender lines came out yesterday to criticise a Malaysian federal minister who appeared to endorse domestic violence in one of two short videos she posted on social media. She said, quote, "Husbands are allowed to use a gentle but firm physical touch that's educational on recalcitrant wives." This from Siti Zala Mod Yusof, the Deputy Minister for Women, Family and Community Development. The MP from the Malaysian Islamic Party also advised men to use counselling and sleep separately from their spouses for 3 days, saying that Islam recommends such measures for when their wives do something they disapprove of. She also recommended that women make sure their husbands have eaten, prayed and were in good mood before approaching a difficult subject to ensure harmony at home. The videos have been viewed more than 40,000 times. I suspect they may be viewed a lot more than that. New coronavirus infections are declining in many parts of Japan, but serious cases are still on the increase. 10,334 new infections were reported for a sixth straight day of a week-on-week decline. But seriously ill patients on artificial respiration have risen to 74. The number of cases deemed serious across the country remain at 1,400 as of yesterday, amid high hospital occupancy rates. Quasi-emergency measures are set to expire in 21 prefectures by this Sunday, but some are considering extending them. As the Singapore Airshow kicks off today, plane manufacturers are hoping to secure big deals with airlines as the 4-day event featuring aviation's finest. Airbus expressed optimism that its new A350 freight plane will sell well against Boeing's 777X freighter. Qatar Airways has already secured a launch order for the future Boeing freighter following a dispute with Airbus, as well as 25 of the controversial Boeing 737 MAX jets. Meanwhile, delegates say that Singapore Airlines could confirm a provisional order for the new Airbus freighter this week. Both Boeing and Airbus have agreed to convert existing passenger planes into cargo carriers to offset the growing demand for cargo aircraft globally. But coronavirus isn't the only thing stoking fears in travellers. In Malaysia, flyers now have to watch out for snakes on a plane. Yikes. An AirAsia passenger flight was forced to make an emergency landing when passengers spotted a snake slithering in the overhead luggage compartment. Malaysia's budget airline confirmed the incident, which took place last week on a domestic flight from KL to the east coast of Borneo Island. The captain landed the plane in Kuching, about 900 kilometres west of its intended destination, to allow the plane to be fumigated. Passengers were safely transferred to another flight, this time without the snakes. Well, that rounds up our quick look at the region's main news stories. Asia News Today comes out early afternoon around Asia, every weekday here on the Thaiger. Please tell your expat friends around the region, click the like button and subscribe to the channel, please, to bless the YouTube algorithm. Thanks to our production team of Jordan and Jason. We'll be back again tomorrow.